So good morning to all, and good morning to my fellow commissioners. Commissioner O'Brien.
Good morning. I am here.
Commissioner Hill.
Good morning, everyone. I am present.
And good morning to Commissioner Skinner.
Morning, everyone. I'm here.
Great, thank you. This proceeding is an adjudicatory proceeding and requires me to really read into the record quite a long narrative. So I thank you for your patience and understanding, but it will outline our proceeding and it will explain to all the objectives. So good morning, and today is Monday, April 11th, 2022. This is an adjudicatory hearing before the Massachusetts Gaming Commission relative to the request for interim authorization for a transfer of interest related to MGM Springfield. Before we get started, I want to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded and it is being streamed. My name is Kathy Judd-Stein, and I am the chair of the commission. I am joined today by my colleagues, Commissioners Eileen O'Brien, Brad Hill, and Nikisha Skinner. The entire commission will preside over the hearing and decision of this matter. This hearing is convened pursuant to 205 CMR 101.01, paragraph 2, subsection D, and will be conducted in accordance with 205 CMR 101.01, the informal fair hearing rules outlined in 801 CMR 1.02 and Chapter 38 of the Massachusetts General Laws. I would also like to notify everyone, as I mentioned, that the proceeding will continue to be recorded. A notice of hearing dated April 5th, 2022 was issued in the matter to the parties. Therein, it identifies the issues that this hearing is intended to address. Though everything raised in the Iep Investigative Report is in consideration here, the Commission has indicated that it will specifically be considering the issue presented in 205 CMR 116.10 subsection 5 relative to interim authorization. That standard requires the Commission to determine, quote, whether after initial inquiry into the transferee's suitability, any apparent disqualifications have been revealed, or there is any other known reason why a positive determination of suitability may not ultimately be achieved, close quote. To that end, the cited regulation sets out the specific considerations in making a decision in this matter. They include the following. 1, whether the proposed transferee has submitted all RFA-1 applications as required by 205 CMR 115.01, subparagraph 3, whether the proposed transferee has submitted a fully executed trust agreement in accordance with 205 CMR 116.10, subsection 6, whether the proposed trustee has satisfied the qualification criteria applicable to a key gaming employee executive in accordance with 205 CMR 134.00, whether there is any preliminary evidence of anything that would serve to disqualify the proposed transferee from licensure in accordance with General Laws, Chapter 23K, Sections 12 and 16, or there is any other reason known as to why a positive determination of suitability may not ultimately be achieved. Whether the proposed transfer would violate 205 CMR 116.09, sections sub 3 or 4, and section 3 is inapplicable to this proceeding, but section 4 addresses whether the transfer will result in the transferee having an interest in more than one gaming license. Whether the proposed transferee has certified that they are unaware of any reason why the proposed transferee would not be found qualified pursuant to GL Chapter 23K, Section 12 and 16, whether it is in the best interest of the Commonwealth for the gaming establishment to continue to operate pursuant to interim authorization. And finally, whether the proposed transfer will result in a change of control. And if so, whether the transferee has agreed to assume all of the terms and conditions of the transferor's gaming license. There are 3 parties before us today, and all are represented by legal counsel. I will ask that Mr. Nozel, Mr. Albano, and Ms. Hall to each please identify yourself and your teams and advise the Commission as to whom you represent as applicable. Let's start with Ms. Hall.
Good morning, everyone. Heather Hall for the Investigations and Enforcement Bureau. And here with me today, we have financial investigator Paul Eldridge, as well as Massachusetts State Police Sergeant David Collette. And we will have available the Chief of the Financial Investigations Division, Monica Chang, as well as financial investigator Matt Jordan.
Okay, Mr. Nozel.
Good morning, Chair. Jed Nozel on behalf of MGM Resorts International, MGP Growth Properties, and their relevant affiliates. We are joined today, or I am joined today by Patrick Madamba, Senior Vice President and Legal Counsel for MGM, Laura Norton, Senior Vice President and Legal Counsel also for MGM, Jessica Cunningham, Senior Vice President and Assistant Corporation Secretary for MGM Resorts, and Gus Kim, Vice President and Legal Counsel, MGM Northeast Region, which of course includes MGM Springfield.
Okay, and good morning, Mr. Albano.
Morning, Chair. I'm here today on behalf of Vici and its related entities. With me are Mr. John Payne, who's the President and Chief Operating Officer of Vici, Ms. Samantha Gallagher, the company's General Counsel, Elena Kyle, Associate General Counsel. We also have Mr. Carl Sadasanti on the line, who is the trustee designated by Vici. And also with me as counsel is Mr. Michael Fabius, who's with Ms. Kyle in the same place. We have 2 other individuals who are available as needed today. Edward Petoniak, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Vici, and Mr. David Kieske, who is Executive Vice President, Chief Financial Officer, and Treasurer of the company here today. Thank you.
Thank you. At the conclusion of my opening comments, this proceeding will commence with opening remarks. Each party will be offered an opportunity to make a statement, though it is not required. After opening statements, we will move to the presentation of the evidence in this matter, and the IEB will be called upon to present its findings as described in the investigative report. Any commissioner may ask a question of anybody presenting information at any point during or following the presentation. At the conclusion of the IEB's presentation, each of the petitioners through counsel will be afforded an opportunity to ask questions of any individual who presented information on behalf of the IEB relative to any matter addressed in the investigative report or to which he or she spoke. If for some reason we miss your inquiry, commissioners, you can use the device of the hand wave that we now have, or simply speak up, and just because of the virtual capacity today. At the conclusion of the IEB's presentation, the petitioners will each be given the same opportunity to make a presentation. They may call any witnesses and present any other evidence they desire. The Commission has directed in the notice of hearing that at a minimum, the following individuals be available if called upon to testify at this hearing on behalf of the petitioners and are prepared to address the issues I've previously outlined, as well as any matter addressed in the investigative report. And these individuals are Edward B. Petoniak, Chief Executive Officer and Director of Vici, John Payne, President and Chief Operating Officer of Vici, Samantha Gallagher, Executive Vice President, General Counsel and Secretary of Vici, and Mr. Sadotati, the named trustee. Additionally, the Commission may require any of the individuals, including the individual qualifiers identified in the investigative report, to address the hearing to address any matters relating to the proposed transfer. As before, any commissioner may ask any question of any witness or presenter at any time during or after any presentation, and the IEB may ask any clarifying questions of any presenter at the conclusion of the MGM or Vici presentation, respectively. Either party may raise any objection it desires at any time. However, the basis for all objections must be clearly stated. And finally, at the conclusion of the presentations of all of the evidence, the IEB and petitioners will be provided an opportunity to make closing remarks summing up their view of the evidence. Before we begin, I understand that there are a number of exhibits for consideration at this hearing that have been exchanged by the parties in advance. There are quite a few. The exhibits are as follows. Exhibit A will be the notice of hearing dated April 5th, 2022. Exhibit B will be the letter from Attorney Nozel and Attorney Albano dated February 18, 2022. Exhibit C will be the executed amended Springfield nominee trust dated April 1, 2022. Exhibit D will be cover letter relative to the transaction from Attorney Hall dated April 4, 2022. Exhibit E will be the IEB's investigative report regarding interim authorization for MGM Springfield Vici REIT transaction dated April 4, 2022. Exhibit F will be the document containing charts A and B, which illustrate the corporate structure pre and post transaction. Exhibit G will be the exhibit packet that accompanies the investigative report and contains checklists further illustrating the IEB's investigative efforts. These items have been marked confidential in consideration of the amount of personal and sensitive information that they contain. Exhibit H will be the master lease to which the property will be subject. And Exhibit I will be the PowerPoint presentation prepared by the petitioners describing the transaction. Are there any objections to any of these exhibits being marked and entered into evidence?
None on behalf of Vici, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Albano. Mr. Nozel. Oh, I hate to do this to you, Jed, but you are on mute. Thank you.
Yep, sorry, Chair.
No problem. And did you say none, Jed? We couldn't hear you.
Yes, Chair, no objections, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And as I have said many times, we're not living a day unless we've said you're on mute. And now, is there any concern for you, Ms. Hall?
No, there is not, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Those exhibits shall be admitted into evidence. Thank you, Todd, Councilor Grossman. For purposes of ensuring a clean record, I ask that the parties, when possible, please make reference to the aforementioned exhibit letters when referring to any of these documents. If either party would like to have any additional documents entered into evidence during the course of the hearing, please ensure that they are properly introduced and marked for the record. The Commission anticipates that its inquiry at this proceeding will be related to the matters addressed in the investigative report and contained in the notice of hearing. In the event that a line of questioning conducted by the Commission moves into an area that has not been included or the report or notice, but that is material to the final determination of this matter, any party may request a recess in the in the proceeding in order to review the issue. The Commission will make a final decision at the conclusion of the evidentiary portion of the hearing. The Commission will elect to deliberate privately outside of the view of the parties. That decision has been made prior to this time interest of being consistent with our past practice. In either event, if at any point during the Commission's deliberations it determines that further testimonial documentary evidence is desired, we do reserve the right to ask the appropriate party to provide such evidence prior to a final decision being made. And ultimately, a written decision will be issued. We will now swear all the witnesses in. Counsel, are all the individuals you anticipate presenting testimony in this matter present on this call? I believe you've indicated so. Could I get that affirmed once more?
Yes, that is so on behalf of Vici.
Okay.
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Chair, on behalf of IEB. Thank you.
Okay. So for those who will be testing at this proceeding, please raise your right hand. Okay, thank you. Oops, my apologies, everybody. A little bit of a glitch.
I just give a quick note to Monica and Matt that you should also raise your hand because even though you're not directly on, you may be called upon. So if you could also be sworn, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, good reminder. I just actually put myself into a little bit of a vacuum here, everyone, so just bear with me. Okay, do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will provide before the Commission at this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If you could.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, and I'll have responded for the record in the affirmative. Okay. So given simply the extensive number of exhibits in this matter, a proceeding of this nature necessarily requires the consideration of a wide variety of information that takes several forms. Some of the information and documentation may include commercially sensitive or personal and protected information. The public discussion of such information may result in an unwarranted invasion of an of an individual's personal privacy, or may place an entity at a competitive disadvantage if such information were to be publicly discussed. For the Commission to be able to effectively and diligently execute its legal obligations prior to making a final finding relative to interim authorization, it must be at liberty to fully inquire relative to any of these sensitive matters without compromising the individuals or entities involved. To do otherwise would be at a minimum unfair and potentially unlawful. Accordingly, with the assent of my colleagues, we will exercise the discretion afforded in accordance with 205 CMR 101.01, paragraph 7, to close this proceeding to the public in order to fully address a few preliminary matters that need to be addressed. In this case, the Commission is simply exercising a procedural mechanism. The Commission intends to reopen the proceeding to the public in a streaming line. Before we close the proceeding to the public, I'd like to address one last matter. It is my understanding that a pre-hearing conference was conducted this past Tuesday with representatives of the petitioners, the IEB, and our general counsel, at which procedural and evidentiary issues were discussed. Before we begin, do either the petitioners or IEB have any preliminary issues or objections they would like to raise?
Not on behalf of Vici. None.
Okay.
No objections to raise. Chair. Thank you.
Okay. And IEB, are you set to proceed?
Yes, that's correct. No objections.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Commissioners, at this point, would you like to offer any thoughts relative to closing the hearing to the public for the reasons I previously discussed? Commissioner, I'm going to go through, ask each of you. Commissioner O'Brien, are you set to go to proceed with a closed proceeding?
I am, Madam Chair.
Okay. Commissioner Hill.
I am as well.
Thank you. And Commissioner Skinner.
Also set, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so this is always a bit of a challenge. but it's my understanding that we can now actually leave this virtual meeting, and we will be able to regain entrance to the public forum at the conclusion of our private hearing. So again, we can leave, and we will see you. You have an invitation in your schedules, which will allow you access to the private session room. Okay, thank you, everyone. And again, to all, thank you for your patience as we navigate this complex matter.
Oh, that's why.
So as a heads up, it looks like we are able to just, we've basically restarted the previous stream that we were on, so we're good to go. I'm gonna leave this hearing will resume shortly graphic up on the screen, and then when we are ready to restart, I can stop sharing my screen and take it down.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Dave.
Not a problem. Yeah, so we are still we're good to go on the original one that we were on. So someone just give me a holler when we're ready to go.
Okay. When the chair returns, I gave her the update though, so great.
Dave, I understand that we would be all set for streaming.
We should be good. I can take down the shared screen I've got whenever we are ready to go.
Yeah, I think you can go ahead. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. A couple minutes later than I anticipated, but I'm just having a little bit of a technical issue that's being worked on as we speak, so thank you. We are resuming the adjudicatory hearing and public forum that we started at 10 o'clock this morning. We had a short session in private to address a procedural matter, and I want to remind everyone, because we are meeting virtually and we are recording this meeting, I do want to do a roll call. So Commissioner O'Brien.
I am here.
Commissioner Hill.
I am here.
And Commissioner Skinner.
I'm here.
Thank you. So we return to where we were before that earlier private session. And I'm going to now ask the petitioners, beginning with Mr. Albano, to please proceed with any opening remarks that he would like to make on behalf of the petitioner. And if it is your intention to stipulate to some or all of the investigatory report, which has been marked as Exhibit E, I invite you to do so at this juncture as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank
We do stipulate to all of the conclusions of the IEB report in every material respect. So as for an opening, what I'm about to say may be too brief to actually qualify as an opening, but if I may, I did want to say for the record that we are here today seeking interim authorization for the Vici acquisition of MGP, and that the evidence before the commission, both the IEB report and the testimony you hear today, will show that all of the regulatory requirements of 205 CMR 116.10.5 are met. You listed them all earlier. I will not repeat them here, but if I could just say that the evidence will in particular show that, as with the prior analogous transactions the commission has looked at, the GLPI transaction and the first MGP transaction, there will be no change in control of the licensee as a result of this transaction. And for those reasons, we're asking that it be approved. The only other thing if I could add, is that I know I speak for Vici when I say very much appreciate the thoroughness and professionalism and just plain old effort that all of the commission staff put into this process. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, then I think we'll turn now to Mr. Nosel on behalf of the MGM petitioners. Again, if it's your intention, Mr. Nosel, to stipulate to some or all of the investigatory report, I invite you to do so.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Yes, MGM and MGP stipulate in all material respects to the IUB's investigative report. I don't have much to add beyond what John said, except to be maybe quicker than he was. And to also just stress our thanks to the commission staff and the IEB staff for all their work that went into this, starting with then Director Skinner, now Commissioner, and the licensing division, and as well as Heather and her team for all their efforts and diligence over the last several months.
Thank you. I'm going to move on then to Ms. Hall and ask that you make any introductory remarks you'd like to make and then move directly into the IEB's presentation. I actually am going to ask Ms. Hall, if you, before you make your introductory remarks, if I could just have 5 minutes, please, I'd appreciate it. I'm just dealing with a technical issue and I think it can get resolved.
Absolutely. And Chair, I just want to say for the record that we're going to have a judgment-free zone on tech issues today because I have to share a chart. So I'm all about a judgment-free zone with respect to technology issues. So thank you.
Thank you. Just one, if I could just have a couple of minutes, stay tuned, everyone, please. Thank you. Hi, Dave. It's Kathy. If you could take down the notice, that would be great. Thank you,
All
everyone.
set.
Thank you, everyone, for your patience. I know that this has taken longer than certainly the 5 minutes I had promised. To be clear, our team took care of my tech issues promptly. But in the meantime, we did have a procedural matter that came to our attention that the commission and legal need to address in a second private session on its own. So we will have to keep you. I think that the advice for you is to plan on either tuning out, from your audio and your visual for a few minutes, because we will return to this public forum. Is that right, Crystal? Am I saying that correctly? We will return to this particular link for this forum.
Yes, this should stay open given we've created this separate session under me.
Okay, great. So I again appreciate your patience. Again, this is a procedural matter that we need to address among ourselves, and then we'll return. So again, for the legal team and my fellow commissioners, I'll see you in the virtual room that has been established. Commissioner O'Brien, are you able to see how it's the invite? I think it says.
I'm looking at it now. It just says Commissioner Private Session. Crystal, is that it?
That's correct. That's the newest one.
That's the one.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone.
Crystal, I didn't get that. Do you want me on that or not?
No, I think, Karen, that we're all set.
Okay, got it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you, Dave. I think that can come down once again.
All set.
Okay. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Again, we thank you so much for your patience. These are matters that we don't deal with very frequently, and so we are working very, very hard to be correct in our processes, and that was a very helpful session. So Dave, you're all set for streaming?
Yep, we are back up and running.
Okay. I'm going to take the roll call again. Commissioner O'Brien,
I am here.
Commissioner Hill,
Present.
and Commissioner Skinner.
I'm here.
Okay. We are about to resume our adjudicatory hearing that we commenced at 10 in this public forum, and move on to the IEP portion of its presentation. But at this time, I want to turn to Commissioner Skinner.
Hi, yes, thank you, Chair. Folks, out of an abundance of caution, I have decided to recuse myself from this proceeding and will be signing off now. Thank
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Skinner. We will see you hopefully at opening day. Thank you. Okay, so if we return to where we were, I am now asking Ms. Hall if you would like to make your introductory remarks and move into your presentation once more. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Chair and Commissioners. I don't have too much in the way of an opening except to follow up on what Attorneys Albano and Nozel stated. I just want to thank both of them, as well as Attorneys Elena Otero-Keel, Patrick Madama, and Mike Fabius for all their cooperation and responsiveness as we navigated this process. And I emphasize we because there were a lot of members of the IEB team who worked on this investigation, and I just want to really briefly say a thank you to all of them, because I know this is going to be possibly a complicated discussion and there may be a lot of questions, so I want to make sure I get these recognitions out. So obviously, Director Loretta Lilios, just want to thank her for her guidance throughout the process. Chief of Financial Investigations, Monica Chang, Sergeant David Collette with the Mass State Police, as well as Trooper John Morris, Trooper Tom Roger, and financial investigators Paul Eldridge, Susan LaRosa, Dong Fei Zhu, David McKay, and Matt Jordan, and also IEB paralegal Brittany Costello. So with that, I'll go right into the IEB's investigation and findings. Over the last approximately 2 months, the IEB conducted a review of the Vici REIT transaction in accordance with the Commission's regulations, 205 CMR 116.10 subsection 5. The IEB's findings are set forth in the investigative report that you have marked as Exhibit E in this proceeding. And as the Commission knows, there are 3 entities that we're going to be discussing today. We have MGM Resorts International, or MGM, MGM Growth Properties LLC, or MGP, which is a real estate investment trust, which we refer to as a REIT, and Vici Properties, which is also a REIT. Now, as Attorney Albano noted, we are here because MGP, MGM, and Vici are seeking interim authorization for the transaction that's described in the IEB's investigative report. It's also referred to as the sequel transaction, or the Vici REIT transaction. In this proposed transaction, Vici will acquire MGP and all of its subsidiaries. This includes the acquisition of the real property associated with the MGM Springfield Gaming Establishment, also referred to as the Springfield property. With representatives of MGM and Vici described this proposed transaction in their presentation to the Commission on March 3rd. The IEB has reviewed the transaction and summarized the key aspects of it in its investigative report, and that's in sections 1, 3, and 5 of the investigative report. Now, to get a sense of the proposed sequel transaction, it's helpful to have the backdrop of what the report refers to as the first transaction, for which the commission granted interim approval back on October 28th of 2021. In the first transaction, MGP acquired MGM's equity interest in the Springfield property. And that was part of a series of prior transactions that MGP had also acquired 15 other MGM properties. So with respect to the current structure as it stands today between MGM and MGP, the key points are as follows. MGP, through its subsidiaries, is the passive owner of the Springfield property because it's a REIT. MGM Springfield Redevelopment is currently a subsidiary of MGP. MGM Springfield Redevelopment owns and holds the title to the Springfield property and leases it to MGP Lessor, the landlord, and I say landlord with a capital L, and that's via an intercompany lease. And I say with a capital L because MGP Lessor and the entity I'm about to note, MGM Lessee, have kind of key roles in this, and I'll be showing you the chart just shortly here in a minute. So MGP Lessor then leases the property to MGM Lessee through the MGM-MGP master lease. And MGM Lessee is a subsidiary of MGM. Blue Tarp, importantly, is also a subsidiary of MGM, and it's the operator of the MGM Springfield gaming establishment, as well as the holder of the Category 1 gaming license. And just a note that MGP uses the same structure for all of the other gaming properties in its portfolio, which are operated by MGM subsidiaries. And so here is where I'm going to go, and I'm going to go into hopefully the judgment-free zone to show you all this chart and make sure that I'm sharing the appropriate document. Can you all see this? This is chart A, and this has been marked as Exhibit F. And I think
if you could make it slightly larger, it'd be helpful.
Chair,
Maybe
does that help at all when I expand it that way so that you can see that right-hand corner of the chart?
it might be, I can maybe help myself by my view.
Okay. Yes,
Thanks.
that might help.
Mm,
Do this.
that's okay. We're good.
Well, what we can do, we can start on the left side and then I'll navigate over to the right side.
Thank you.
So over here on the left side of the chart, so this is the depiction of the current structure. We have MGP, which is MGM Growth Properties, up here at the top. And then in this shaded area, this peach area, these are the MGP subsidiaries. And all the way down here, we have the land and premises, which is the Springfield property. The Springfield property under the current structure is owned by MGM Springfield Redevelopment, LLC, and ultimately owned by MGP. Now, Springfield Redevelopment leases that property up to MGP Lessor via the intercompany lease. MGP Lessor then leases the property over through this master lease over to MGM Lessee. MGM Lessee, in turn, as the tenant, through an operating sublease, leases the property over to Blue Tarp. And just want to note, again, on the left side of the chart, we have the MGP entities. And then we have on the right side of the chart, MGM and their two subsidiaries, MGM Lessee and Blue Tarp. Now, in this arrangement, which is the current structure, Blue Tarp continues to operate the MGM Springfield gaming establishment, and it continues to be the holder of the gaming, Category 1 gaming license. Now, with respect to the proposed structure, which I'll show that chart in just 1 second, Vici is going to acquire MGP and its subsidiaries, which is all the entities here in the shaded area. It's not going to, we don't have the shaded area for MGP because that, as I noted in the report, is going to be subsumed into Vici upon if the commission grants interim approval for the transaction. So in essence, Vici, which I noted is also a REIT, will become the new passive owner of the Springfield property. In simple terms, to quote Attorney Pat Madamba, as he explained at the March 3rd meeting, the MGP entities, which are in the peach shading, will slide under the Vici umbrella. And so that gets us over to chart B. which is here. So in chart B, this is a depiction of the proposed structure. Now you have the Vici entities up here in the top left, and you have the very same MGP entities in the peach shading. Now, two of them are going to be renamed, but they are all still the same entities. And there's going to be the same arrangement that I just described with respect to the current structure. We've got Springfield property down here, which is the landed premises. MGM Springfield Redevelopment will continue to be the ultimate holder of the title, and obviously, but owned indirectly by Vici Properties Inc. They will then lease the property to MGP lessor. Then we go across the master lease here, which is the amended MGP master lease, leases it up to MGM lessee over to Blue Tarp via the operating sublease. Again, in this chart as well, we have the MGM entities on the right-hand side. MGM, under the proposed sequel transaction, continue to be a subsidiary of, MGM lessee will continue to be a subsidiary of MGM, as will Blue Tarp. Blue Tarp will also continue to be the operator of the gaming establishment, and it will hold continue to hold the Category 1 gaming license. So that's essentially a depiction of both of the transactions. And hopefully, as the commission has navigated trying to figure out these entire arrangement, I hope those charts were helpful. We had a lot of good input from our team and also obviously the MGM and Vici. So with respect to how this arrangement works, as I noted, Vici is a REIT, and because it's a REIT, it owns the real estate assets of its properties and leases them back to the tenants via triple net leases. One of the key features of the triple net lease are that the landlord acts as a passive landlord. The landlord, the tenant, is responsible for expenses such as taxes, insurance, maintenance, and costs, as well as capital expenditures. So with respect to the proposed Vici transaction, and we had talked about the master lease when we looked at the charts, the key provisions of the amended master lease are as follows. So the lease term will be 25 years to 2047. There will be 3 10-year renewal options at the tenants, which is MGM option, and the tenant being MGM lessee, again, a subsidiary of MGM. The annual rent across the board will be $860 million. And the capital expenditures will continue to be 1% of the net revenue, and that's in the aggregate across all of the MGP properties. Now, under the lease, Blue Tarp will continue to have the right to make capital improvements, and they may do that without consent of Vici as long as certain conditions are present, such as not removing any material existing structure. The alteration, it can't pose any material adverse effect on the structural integrity, and it may not be reasonably likely to reduce the value of the facility. And it also has to be consistent with the facility's intended use. And just to point out something that Attorney Laura Norton noted at the previous hearing on the MGP REIT transaction, even in circumstances where the landlord's approval is required, Vici could not unreasonably withhold that approval. So in addition, under the master lease, Blue Tarp as the operator will be responsible for maintenance, insurance, and taxes and other expenses. And as I noted, Blue Tarp will continue to operate and control the MGM Springfield gaming establishment and continue to be the Category 1 licensee. So as noted in the Iubs report, there are 2 stages to this approval process: interim authorization and final approval. We are here today, as we've discussed, at the interim authorization stage. And one of the first steps in this investigation was the scoping of the transaction. And as noted in the report, the IEB identified 10 entity qualifiers, 4 of which were Vici entities and 5 of which were MGP. And there were 4 individual qualifiers. The individual qualifiers were Mr. Edward Petoniak, who's the CEO and director of Vici, Mr. John Payne, the president and chief operating officer of Vici, Ms. Samantha Gallagher, who's the executive vice president and general counsel of Vici and secretary. And then we also designated Mr. Carl Sordasanti, who is the successor trustee. And as I noted above, I just wanted to again highlight that all of the entities and individuals and their representatives cooperated with the IEB's investigation, and they were very responsive to the IEB's request. And I also noted that Vici and its subsidiaries are qualifiers in the transaction. And we have financial investigator Paul Eldridge here to provide an overview of Vici itself and the financial investigation that was performed on Vici. We also have Sergeant Dave Collette here to summarize the other components of the investigation, as well as discuss any questions the commission may have with respect to the investigation regarding Mr. Sotosanti's suitability as the trustee. And with that, I'm going to actually turn it over to Paul Eldridge.
Thank you, Heather. Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. The IEB conducted an interim financial investigation of Vici and its subsidiaries. As part of our evaluation, we reviewed financial statements, tax returns, and credit reports for each entity when available. The audit firm of Deloitte & Touche LLP issued unqualified audit opinions for all years reviewed, which stated that the financial statements were presented fairly in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles. The accounting firm of KPMG LLP prepared the tax returns for all years reviewed. For the tax returns reviewed, we noted that there were no total tax amounts shown, which is reasonable because the REIT distributed its income to shareholders in the form of dividends. Finally, we reviewed recent credit reports and no issues were identified. I would like to point out that there is one typo in Exhibit E, which is the Iep Investigative Report. On the top of page 20, if you want to flip there, it reads that approximately 300,000 shares of common stock were issued to Caesars Operating Company. The number of shares should be 300 million. That's 300 million shares. These shares passed through Caesars Operating Company during formation, but at no other point did Caesars or its affiliates own any interest in Vici. In summary, the interim financial review did not reveal any issues or concerns with Vici's financial stability, integrity, and background. Our evaluation focused on the acquisition of MGM growth properties by Vici. The proposed transaction will transfer ownership of the MGM Springfield property to Vici, but MGM will continue to be the property's operator through the Massachusetts Category 1 gaming licensee, Blue Top Redevelopment LLC. The master lease will continue to be between MGM and MGP, but Vici will now be the owner of MGP. Subsequent to the transaction, the MGM Springfield property will continue to be included in the existing master lease, which will be amended and restated. This transaction will simplify MGM's corporate structure and is the culmination of MGM's asset-light strategy. As a result of this transaction, MGM expects to be well-positioned to continue to pursue growth opportunities in its core business, with significant financial flexibility to continue to deploy its capital to maximize shareholder value. Through this transaction, Vici will advance its goals of portfolio enhancement and diversification. This transaction will increase the annual rental revenues of Vici. The amended and restated master lease will have an initial annual rent of $860 million, which translates into a fixed stream of income for Vici. Vici's financial results have improved since its inception in 2017, as more properties were added to its portfolio each year. Net revenue increased over 553% from year 2017 to year 2020, and net income increased over 1,912% during the same time period. Most recently, as reflected in Vici's 2021 Form 10-K annual report, the company's net income increased by 14.2% since the previous year to over $1 billion. That concludes my prepared remarks. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sergeant Dave Collette to talk about the other aspects of the investigation.
Good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners. Good afternoon to representatives from Vici Properties and MGM. Again, Sergeant David Collette of the Massachusetts State Police, assigned here to the Mass Gaming Commission's Investigations and Enforcement Bureau. Assisting me in our portion of this investigation, Trooper John Morris and Trooper Tom Roger. After an in-depth review of all applications and submissions from Vici Properties and MGM, a thorough background investigation was conducted regarding the 5 Vici property entities, 3 Vici property individual qualifiers, the MGM entity, and the trustee of this transaction, Mr. Carl Sotosanti. As part of this investigation, routine communications were conducted with the applicants, which required the submission of additional information and supplemental documents. All communications with the applicants were courteous and professional, and information requested was provided in a timely manner. The process by which this investigation was conducted involved extensive research and discovery of any additional information which could be learned about the applicant, associated entities, and individuals from as many sources as investigators deem necessary. Some of these sources involve databases that are either available to the public or are law enforcement sensitive. After the completion of this research, investigators compiled the results into a specific checklist for each entity and individual involved in the investigation, and a full report was prepared separately for the trustee. Included in these checklists are queries conducted for any criminal history at the federal, state, local, and even international level. Individual applicants are required to submit their fingerprints as part of their application package, which are run through a criminal records database. It should be noted that no such criminal history was discovered for any of the qualifying individuals. Civil litigation databases were queried and reviewed regarding any lawsuits filed against the applicant, entities, or individuals. Particular attention is paid to any suits that contain any accusations of derogatory or fraudulent business practices. And in regard to this investigation, no litigation disclosed or discovered revealed any such accusations or judgments. Secretary of State and SEC databases were queried regarding any filings reported by the applicant or qualifying entities. Any results obtained were reviewed for any derogatory information relating to the applicant or entities involved in this transaction, and no such derogatory information was discovered. Open source and media outlet checks were conducted and reviewed, including any social media. A vast majority of the responses involved the ongoing business transactions, financial information, and specifically this transaction involving the acquisition of MGM Growth Properties by Vici Properties Incorporated. All content was reviewed and revealed no derogatory information regarding any of the involved entities or individuals. Also, as part of these investigations, other jurisdictions in which the applicants are already conducting gaming-related businesses were contacted. All responses received from other jurisdictions revealed no derogatory or disqualifying information in regards to their existing licensure or suitability. After a thorough review of the results of all aspects of the MSP portion of this investigation conducted into the applicant, associated entities, individuals, and trustee of this transaction, no significant issues or concerns were identified. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant Collette. Chair, at this point, I just wanted to note that if there are any questions on the investigation with respect to Mr. Sotosanti, Sergeant Collette will be available to field those, as will I, commissioners, or you have any questions. Or we could perhaps wait until we close out the IEB section and address that piece separately, depending on however you all feel appropriate.
Commissioners, do you have questions that you could ask at this juncture for either Mr. Eldridge or Sergeant Collette?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you.
I'm all set.
We're all set. Heather, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. So with respect to the ultimate findings in the investigation, under the governing regulation, as we've noted, which is 205 CMR 116.10 subsection 5, the IEB will address each of its findings with respect to those criteria, as we have done in pages 25 to 28 of the investigative report. With respect to the first criteria that requires that all the qualifiers have submitted application forms as required, those applications were submitted and deemed complete by the licensing division on January 31st of this year. And the investigators conducted a review of that application, those applications and the forms, and confirmed their completeness. Now, with respect to the second and third criteria, which pertain to the trust and the trustee, we do have a fully executed Springfield amended nominee trust, and that has been submitted to the commission. It's an exhibit in this proceeding, which is Exhibit C. And in a public meeting on March 3rd, the commission approved the terms of the trust. And under the terms of that trust, in the event that a suitability issue arises following interim authorization by the commission, but before final approval, the commission may order the Springfield property property be transferred into the trust. And in the event that the commission ultimately issues a negative determination on suitability, the trust calls for the Springfield property to be returned to Blue Tarp. So with respect to the third criteria regarding the trustee, the IEB investigated Mr. Sotosanti's suitability under the criteria set forth in 205 CMR 134, because he is considered in this matter to be a key gaming employee executive. And as noted in both the reports, the IEB investigative report, as well as the attached report regarding Mr. Sotosanti, Commission previously has determined him to be suitable in both 2014 and again in 2019 in connection with his prior positions with Penn National. Given that he has since retired from those positions, investigators here in this interim authorization examined Mr. Sotosanti's suitability anew. The IEB submits that based on its investigation, Mr. Sotosanti is established by clear and convincing evidence that he remains suitable under the criteria set forth in the Massachusetts Gaming Law and Regulations. And as such, we do recommend that the commission issue a positive determination of suitability for Mr. Sotosanti in his role as trustee of the amended trust. And the fourth criteria is that with respect to the IEB finding no preliminary evidence of anything that would serve to disqualify any of the entity or individual qualifiers under the criteria set forth in 23K sections 12 or 16. And the IEB also did not find any other known reason why a positive determination of suitability may not ultimately be achieved. So with respect to the fifth criteria, the IEB's initial investigation further indicated that the proposed Vici REIT transaction will not result in Vici having a financial interest in more than one gaming license in the Commonwealth. In addition, we also determined that it is not going to result in a transfer of the actual gaming license because, as I noted before, that is going to stay with Blue Tarp. So with respect to the qualifiers, both the individual and representatives of the entities have all certified that they are unaware of any reason why they would not be found qualified. And that satisfies, the IEB found that satisfied the sixth criteria. As for the seventh criteria, that requires the commission to find that it is in the best interest of the Commonwealth for the gaming establishment to continue to operate pursuant to interim authorization. Nothing was revealed in the investigation to suggest that allowing MGM Springfield to continue would not be in the best interest of the Commonwealth. So we note that with respect to that criteria, and similar to the conclusion in the previous REIT transaction, uninterrupted operation of MGM Springfield would ensure that tax revenues continue to come from the gaming establishment and that employment opportunities are available to Massachusetts residents. And finally, with respect to the initial investigation, the final criteria, it does indicate that the proposed Vici transaction will not result in a change of control of the MGM Springfield gaming establishment. By contrast, Vici will be a passive landlord. And again, Blue Tarp will continue to be in control of the operations at MGM Springfield. So with that, I just happy to answer any questions that the chair or commissioners might have.
Questions for Councilor Hall? Heather, very clear report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you to Mr. Eldridge and Sergeant Collette too for your work, and also to Mr. Jordan and Ms. Chang for their work and your teams in their entirety. It's a comprehensive effort, and you've been thanked by the other parties, and we appreciate your professionalism. Okay. So, hold on, I've got to go back to my guidance from Mr. Grossman. Okay. Now I guess that this, now you have the opportunity, petitioner, to ask any questions that you may have from Ms. Hall or other members of the IEB relative to their presentation, or any clarifiers, Mr. Albano or Mr. Nozel. Mr. Albano, if you could state.
No questions from VG.
Thank you. And Mr. Nozel, are you all set?
Thank you, Chair. No questions.
Thank you. I'm, of course, little bit at a disadvantage of reading faces when I'm looking at my notes. Okay, and we'll now turn to the presentation by Vici. Mr. Albano, if you'd like to proceed, please.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
If I may, I'd like to call John Payne, the president and CEO of Vici.
Good afternoon, good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I will be brief. I wanted to first thank you for your consideration and for having us here today. I thought I would literally take 1 or 2 minutes just to add on to the great report the IEB did about our company. Vici started in October of 2017. I was blessed to be one of the first of the 2 employees to start the company at that time. Obviously, you've learned through the report that we are a triple net REIT and a passive landlord who's some wonderful operators. Just to give you an idea of the magnitude of our company after this acquisition, we'll own 43 properties in 15 states. We'll have about 58,000 hotel rooms. 3 of the top 5 largest hotels in the United States will be inside our portfolio. 700 restaurants will be run by our operators, but it's a wonderful quality portfolio with big magnitude in the United States. As you've heard in the IEB report, we are a passive landlord. We're a triple net REIT. We have become the 2nd largest triple net REIT in the United States in 4.5 years because we've been involved in about $29 billion of transactions. That's a quick way of saying we've been busy, and we've been very fortunate that during the pandemic, our tenants, because they have been very strong and great operators, we received 100% of our rent. I'll end by saying, hopefully over the coming years, you'll get to know us, that I have great pride in our company. We've been around, like I said, for 4.5 years. In our first 4 years, we were voted the best places to work by our employees, and something we are incredibly thankful for. And our secret sauce, which you've met a few of my colleagues, Elena and Samantha, who are on this call, our secret sauce is our people. Our people do a wonderful job. We are a real estate company. We are a REIT. But the reason why we have been successful in our short period of time is because of these great executives that we have. So I appreciate your time, and we appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Payne, and thank you again for your patience today as we navigated a few procedural matters. Questions, commissioners, for Mr. Payne? Well, other than a great congratulations having navigated the pandemic so well, we thank you for your team's cooperation throughout this process. I know Massachusetts probably is quite different from other jurisdictions, so we appreciate your tentative attention to all of the details that are required as we make our way through today's proceeding. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Albano?
Yes, Madam Chair, our next witness is Elena Kyle, who I have just a few questions for, and then of course she's available to answer any questions that.
Thank you so much, Council. For the introduction, my name is Elena Kyle. I'm Associate General Counsel here at Vici, and I've served in that role for the duration of the investigation. Like Mr. Payne, I want to take the opportunity on behalf of myself and all of our Vici team members to thank the Commission for their attention to our matter, to express our gratefulness at having the opportunity to present today, and to also thank the staff for their engagement, thoroughness, and precision with which they reviewed our materials. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Ms. Kyle. So I'm going to ask you 2 questions at once, which lawyers aren't supposed to do, but I think I will. The Commission is somewhat familiar with what a REIT is. They've dealt with them before, but I thought it might be helpful to hear from you. Brief description of the nature of a REIT, and then the key features of the lease here. Would you do that for us?
Yes. As I think the Commission may be aware, and as the IEB's report laid out, a REIT is a type of corporate entity that makes a specific election with the IRS, resulting in, for all practical purposes, becoming generally exempt from U.S. federal income tax, as long as all taxable income is distributed to shareholders. the distributions or taxes at an individual investor level as an option. Typically, REITs own income-producing real estate and receive beneficial tax treatment in exchange for abiding by certain restrictions and requirements, most applicably here, I think, for the attention of the Commission and the Investigative Division, limitations on our operations. That does lead me to the description of the lease. The lease is a triple net lease in nature, meaning that the tenants are responsible for all operations and payment of all expenses associated with the properties, including real estate taxes, building insurance, and maintenance. And that's consistent across all triple net leases and consistent with the MGM MGP lease prior to its proposed amendment and restatement in connection with this transaction. One item that I'd like to highlight for the Commission's attention is the capital expenditure requirements. And I know that a number of persons have made this point, but allow me to make it briefly. We've made no changes to the existing capital expenditure requirements that the Commission is familiar with in the existing lease. And we have no right to consent or give notice for any capital expenditures made by the tenant other than in the very limited circumstances set forth in the Ieb's report. And even in such case, such consent may not be unreasonably withheld or denied.
Thanks. Let's move ahead to one other topic. Have you personally reviewed the Ieb report?
Yes, I have personally reviewed the Ieb's report.
And do you agree with its conclusions in all material respects, having read it?
I do.
Do you know of any evidence that would disqualify Vici from licensure, or any reason why a positive determination won't ultimately be achieved here?
I do not know of any evidence or any such reason.
And if this transaction moves forward, will Vici have a financial interest in any other gaming license or gaming establishment here in the Commonwealth?
No.
And if the transaction is approved and consummated, will it result in a change in control of the licensee?
No.
Okay, and last question, Ms. Kyle. Did Vici submit any applications for any entity or individual qualifier that later was withdrawn after the Ieb raised a suitability issue? Did that happen here?
No, it did not.
That's all the questions I have for the witness, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you're all set, Mr. Albano. Okay, and we wish to thank Ms. Gallagher too for being here today. Thank you. Do you have questions for Ms. Kyle? Commissioner O'Brien?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Commissioner Hill?
I'm all set as well. Thank you.
No, Mr. Albano, you asked the key questions. Of course, at front of mind for all of us are the capital expenditure obligation core to the intent of 23K. So thank you for addressing that. And the other questions were very helpful for me. So thank you. Then turning to again, my guidance. I guess now for Councillor Hill, do you have any questions or clarifiers that you'd ask of Vici? Oh, and Heather, if you could give a oral answer.
Oh, I apologize. I thought you.
You know what it is. I'm reading a little bit, so my screen is down right now. So
I am sorry. I heard you just say Hill, and I was thinking you were asking.
Oh, I said Hill instead of Hall. Did I call you? Did I say? I guess I meant to say Councillor Hall. That could be me not being very articulate. My apologies.
Also be my my hearing issues. So no, I don't.
Probably me.
But thank you, Chair.
Heather, that was not your hearing.
Oh, it wasn't? Thank you. I'm just going to decide that might mean I need another sip of coffee. Councillor Hall, thank you. It's not the first time I've done that, I don't think.
It's okay.
Are you all set?
We are, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Now we're going to turn to MGM, the petitioners. Mr. Nozel, if you'd like to proceed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, members of the Commission. I I have just a few limited questions for Mr. Madamba, and we'll be brief. So, Mr. Madamba, as a result of this transaction, will there be any change in control of Blue Tarp Redevelopment's gaming license?
There will not.
And Mr. Madamba, as the owner of the licensee, can you state why it's in the best interest of the Commonwealth for MGM Springfield to continue to operate pursuant to interim authorization?
Sure. For many reasons, the state and the city will continue to receive direct tax and other financial payments without interruption. MGM Springfield's employees will continue to be employed without interruption. The vendors, including local minority women-owned vendors, for example, will continue to have the opportunity to provide goods and services to MGM Springfield without interruption. And Massachusetts, and in particular Western Massachusetts, will continue to receive without interruption the spin-off economic benefits from MGM's approximate $1 billion investment in MGM Springfield.
Thank you, Mr. Madamba. Chair, I don't have anything else at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Nozel. Questions for MGM? And I guess it's just, okay, you're both shaking your head no. All right, and I'm all set too. Mr. Nozel, I'm having a hard time finding Pat on my screen. You just shifted. There you are. You shifted. Thank you so much, Mr. Madamba. Yes, that absolutely helps to have some motion. Navigating the screens is a little bit different than navigating in real life. So thank you. You all know that after two plus years now. All right, then, in terms of next steps, I want to make sure, again, to give Councillor Hall, do you have any questions for Mr. Nozel or Mr. Madamba?
I do not, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. All right. So now that we've heard all of the evidence in this matter, before we move to closing remarks, I would like to turn back to my fellow commissioners once again to make sure there are no further sensitive or confidential issues that you would like to explore that would benefit from closing this proceeding to the public under our regulations. This is an opportunity to ask any questions, particularly that might be relevant to the confidential materials that are shielded by law. Commissioner O'Brien, do you have any questions on the exact exhibit with the, I don't have it in front of me, Todd, the letter?
I think it's H. I've gone through them again. Madam Chair, I don't have any questions that I think would require me to ask them in a private adjudicatory setting.
Okay, and Commissioner Hill?
I don't either. Thank you.
Right, and I feel the same way. The our IEB did a superb job. Thank you again to Sergeant Collette and Mr. Eldridge and teams. Making my way through our process, I think nearing the end. My apologies. So I guess at this point, we would turn to closing remarks. Each of the parties would be afforded an opportunity to make a statement that sums up your position, although you don't need to. Mr. Obama, would you like to proceed with remarks? And then you'd be followed by Mr. Nozel and Ms. Hall.
Thank you. I'll be quite brief. We believe we've met all of the requirements of the regulations, and I would just like to point out two things. One, the evidence certainly shows that there's no change in control that would come about as a result of this transaction. And the last thing I'd say is I think it's not an accident that these types of transactions with REITs are happening not just in Massachusetts, but throughout the country. It's good for the industry, and I would submit that in this case, it's also, as for the reasons Mr. Madamba explained, it's good for the Commonwealth, for the operators to have the benefits of these types of transactions. And so we ask respectfully that the interim authorization be granted.
Thank you. Mr. Nozel.
Thank you, Chair. I've benefited throughout this proceeding of going after Attorney Hall and Attorney Albano in connection with making any remarks. So I too will be brief and agree with their positions. We do benefit from a really thorough report, which I think on its own presents substantial evidence for this commission to grant interim authorization. In addition to the witnesses that you've heard today, we believe we've met the standards for 205 CMR 116.10, and we'd respectfully request the commission's approval for interim authorization.
Thank you. And Ms. Hall?
I don't have too much to say except to say thank you again. And that's essentially it. I appreciate all the work of the IEB and all the core communication and cooperation of the parties in this matter.
Thank you. So,
If I may, Sergeant, I really would like to thank, because our attorney did, but I'd like you hear from MGM as well. Personally, we really thank you sincerely, both you, your staff, the IEB, Heather and her team. They've done a remarkable job, and we really do appreciate how this transaction has moved along in Massachusetts. It's greatly appreciated. So thank you again, as always.
thank you. And I appreciated too your testimony today, Mr. Madamba. So thank you. Okay. And is there anyone else who wishes to speak? All right. So the conclusion of the closing statements have been done. And now, thank you. I think that I indicated that we would like to be able to deliberate in private. But before we go on, it has been a disrupted day, and I want to again thank everyone and extend my heartfelt appreciation for your patience. We're going to end this virtual meeting and enter again into another virtual room for our private deliberations. But before I leave this meeting, I do want to give the opportunity for anyone else to raise anything further. And that includes, of course, my two fellow commissioners, Commissioner Hill, Commissioner O'Brien. Do you have anything else that you would like to address or ask?
I'm all set. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I have and reiterating what has been unanimously expressed by all the parties involved, which is just thanking both the applicants and our staff in terms of how efficiently the process has moved and how prepared we've been able to be for these hearings.
Yes, we understood that IEB was working hard on this, and what's very gratifying is to see how much that hard work and timeliness is appreciated. So thank you to all. And we thank you for your thoroughness and again for your work today to all the parties. It's been very helpful, and I guess we've got some work to do now. So thank you. We're going to leave this meeting and we'll go to the next virtual room. And we are so eager to start doing this more and more in person. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone. It's a pretty one here in Massachusetts. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to see you all.
Meeting.